Hey everybody, I was just thinking about Joe Rogan. He needs to be studied. He is like a meta, unintentional version of like a self help guru because he has these secrets to life with his life. It is like a template for how life should be lived with confidence. That's the only thing that I think separates myself from Joe Rogan, from anybody else that is successful or is holding themselves back, is you have to like have the confidence to be willing to put yourself out there, to believe in yourself, to love yourself, to not be afraid to fail or of what people are going to think, because Joe Rogan is crazy successful, and he is literally, no offense, the epitome of the average Joe, which makes him completely the opposite of average. There's nothing average about him, but yet there's nothing that is not average about him. And I don't mean that in an offensive way. He's a freaking like probably like almost a billionaire now or whatever. I mean, he has bukus of money. He's super successful, and he has found immense success in incredibly in demand, competitive workplaces. Like, who actually succeeds at being a stand-up comedian or even like having marginal fame? If you had like that one show, and news radio, it's like he had that show, where he was on and he was like the host of Fear Factor, and he's done enough in this highly competitive industry and industries. But at the same time, nobody, and I do mean like, is nobody on the whole entire planet says that Joe Rogan is their favorite actor. Nobody says, oh, Joe Rogan's my favorite comedian. Nobody, I mean, he's an MMA commentator, but like, I'm sure he does a lot of stuff, but he's not like, won any belts. He's not a king of comedy. He's not like a king of entertainment. But man, he is, because he's so well known and so successful. And the only thing that separates him from anyone is just the willingness to try and to be like, hey, wait, I can take this agency that I have and not be like, blinded by all these illusions of reasons why I cannot. Um, yeah, and that's like everything. Liz Gilbert did that too. And her book was so instrumental for people, but it wasn't my cup of tea. But Big Magic is great. She's an incredible speaker. But she is one of my biggest sources of reverse inspiration. I've said that before, just because, you know, she's this woman who's had all this success with writing, but she has had no like, um, trials and tribulations to speak of, but they are like, to her, that they are, getting a divorce was like something that changed her life, and it nearly shattered her. And she has said this in her own words many times, getting a divorce. But that was a thing that led her to take this like journey, this odyssey around the globe, and then write about it in a super successful book that was then made into the movie Eat, Pray, Love. So, but at the same time, damn, you traveled around the world because you got a divorce. And I know so many people that it's like, man, that was like a Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like, you can't afford to do anything special or other than just like get over it. And she said once that, her biggest thing was like talking to the critics in the future that weren't going to, everybody wasn't going to like her book, but it wasn't getting the writing done. It wasn't like the fear of failure. It was just like, hey, having that positive mindset for when you do get negative attention. But the point is that she never once thought that she wasn't going to get attention, or that she was going to like die a pauper, like with just like a dream in her hand and 5 cents in her pocket. She knew she was going to do it. She had confidence. And Joe Rogan has this confidence to like live. And all you have to do is live an authenticity. And that is it. All we have to do, all any of us have to do, is just live and be, just be. But that means just be ourselves. And that's nothing. So why is that everything? And it's like all these, systems and institutions, and just like the upbringing, that I think it is like in kind of our DNA at this point for most of us. That's why I said Joe Rogan needs to be studied. Why wasn't in his DNA the literal average Joe that is anything but he is? Like it's practically inner DNA to like settle for less than what we deserve and less than just being ourselves fully and loving ourselves and just living a life worth living is settling. And I've said it before, like there were all these I think it's like a myth that like in the recent past, like girls were told we could be whatever we wanted. I was never told that. Like I was told like, it was kind of all but said out loud that, well, you need to stay in the area, stay in West Virginia for sure, preferably Southern West Virginia, and be a teacher or a nurse. And it was like, well, you go to college, but I mean, I didn't even, think that I had options in college. And that's why I studied psychology. I was fascinated by it. But at the end of the day, I couldn't see myself doing anything with it because it's like to actually be a psychologist or a psychiatrist or get a doctorate. I wanted to be a flight attendant when I was a child at one point in time, but I never, when I actually got to that point of saying, hey, this is the steps I'm taking in my life in adulthood that are going to set me up for the rest of my life. What do I want to do? What's a career? I never actually like thought, oh man, I could be a flight attendant. There are women that do that. There are people that do that. I'm sure there's men too, but obviously I'm a woman. I never really thought like I could, um, have dreams that could actually be worthy of translating into goals. And that's the problem with addicts. It's like worthiness or lack thereof. But really, that's the problem with people. I think a lot of times is that we sell ourselves short. Um, and man, I'm just like, it would be so cool to just be one of those people who had confidence from the get go. But I think a lot of people are where I'm at now, which that was not something that came naturally. And even Kristen Cavallari, shout out Laguna Beach. I loved her. I loved Laguna Beach. I loved the heels. I liked the reboot personally. Even she said, that she actually didn't have confidence. It just came off that way because she had kind of like a bold personality naturally, but confidence was not something that she actually had inside of herself until recently. But still, I was like, wow, that's so cool. That's one of the reasons I love her. But she still had, at least this aura of confidence, even if it was just like, more of a facade. But I think a lot of us are getting there and just kind of like, hey, what are we doing if we're not like living, in authenticity and living for ourselves and living a life where we are kind of like disregarding all this like nonsense about like it's just starting to feel like super petty, all the comparisons and judgments and just reasons to be like enraged or reasons to be like victimized. And I just think I'm in a place where I'm just like beyond sick of it, and I'm just really trying to stay streamlined on um at coming at life from a place of authenticity, of self-love, and of confidence that, hey, even if I'm not like loud, boisterous, confident, even if like I can't like speak into a camera without like breaking out into hives of anxiety, I'm still just as worthy, as everyone else, because we all are. It's our lives. We're here. Why don't we just live it the way we want to and just say, fuck the noise. Y'all have a good night.